I think so many things in life totally revolve around your expectations. If you have high expectations for something and those expectations come up short, then you get upset about it. But if you set your expectations low and they get exceeded, then you're thrilled. For example, Kentucky lost to St. Peter's tonight. I think that the expectations for Cat Nation were much higher than that. But I also look at LSU basketball, for example, because I think that we had fairly high expectations for LSU. But with all of the circumstances considered, should our expectations change? We'll get into that plus betting talk as well. Locked on LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I'm Caroline Fenton. I am your host, as I am every day. I am an LSU alum, diehard LSU fan, and I'm now a sports talk radio host here in Nashville, Tennessee for ESPN 1025 The Game. But like I said, expectations. That's what everything in life is about. And I think also that's what being a fan is all about. Our lives as fans completely revolve around expectation. I mean, what do we look at the Troy loss, for example, in 2017? LSU's lost plenty of games since then, and they lost plenty before then. But why does that game stand out so much in our minds? At least in my mind, at least I'm still haunted by it. Is because of the expectation. Why is beating Alabama such a feat? And why is it such a rush? Because the expectation going into that game, at least around the nation, is that Alabama is the better team. When you set the expectation, that's what elicits your emotion. The result of whatever you set your expectation for and how you feel about that is totally dependent on your expectation. Like I said, what about Kentucky losing to St. Peter's on Thursday night? I mean, nobody predicted that happening. A 15 seed upsetting a 2 seed. I even said on our show today on ESPN 1025 The Game, I was giving out betting advice and Kentucky was favored by 18 points. And I said, take Kentucky, are you crazy? I'd never even heard of this place, St. Peter's. I had to Google where St. Peter's is. It's in Jersey City, by the way. And I have a good friend of mine who was a diehard Kentucky basketball fan, and she was in tears because the expectation that Kentucky was going to beat St. Peter's by 18 points or more. And I turn around and I look at LSU. My expectations for this team were to make the tournament. I wasn't sure how much of a run LSU could make in the tournament, especially after seeing their SEC play and kind of getting a better scope of exactly what the personality and the strengths and the weaknesses of this team are. But I really did think that LSU could win a few games, could have a few upsets. I really did think that LSU could make some noise in the tournament. Probably wasn't going to win it. They could make some noise. But sometimes your expectations have to change. Sometimes the variables change. Sometimes things happen and your expectations either get bigger or they go down. I talked earlier this week about the expectations for LSU football. And that's a big question mark because it's a new coach coming in. That's a new variable. So I do wonder, are LSU fans changing their expectations for this LSU basketball team after Will Wade was fired? Should LSU change their expectations for this LSU team after Will Wade was fired? And I think that there are two different ways of looking at this. I think that you could look at it and say, you know what? No, like this team, it's still the same players. We still have high expectations for this team. We've already seen what this team can do. This is the biggest stage in college basketball. So what, are you going to go easy and soft on them now? And then I also see the side of these kids, like they're kids. Like these are babies. I mean, like Kevin Nickelberry said in some of the clips that I shared with you earlier this week, he said, we're the youngest team in the SEC. We don't have a lot of experience on this team. And that's the truth. This team is young. And this team just lost their coach in the middle of the postseason and in pretty dramatic and scandalous fashion. Not only did they lose their coach, they don't even know what's going to go on with LSU basketball in the future. They don't know what the future of this program holds. So I don't really blame them for having other things on their mind. While I do see both sides, while I see the side of, you know what, like, go get them. This team still has a ton of talent, and your expectations shouldn't change. But honestly, I think mine are. And I don't know if it's necessarily bringing down the standard for LSU basketball. And I don't really know if my thoughts have changed much about what this team can do. I still don't think they can win the tournament. They will win the tournament. But I think the way that this team goes out on the court against Iowa State on Friday night, I think we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. In some instances where I may have been more critical, maybe where I would have, really torn apart certain plays or mistakes or stats, I don't think I'm going to do that this time around, because although my expectations for this team may not have changed, while what I think the outcome for this team might be probably hasn't dramatically changed, I think that I need to give this team a little bit of grace. I think that I need to go into this game and kind of look at it like, look, LSU is playing with house money here. And that's kind of how I view it. At least in my own personal fandom, at least in my own mind, and at least in my expectations. LSU is playing under really difficult circumstances. So to me, win all the games that you can. And if you can't, go get them next year. If there is a tournament next year, fingers crossed. And that might sound soft. It might sound like I'm being soft on the team. But I think I need to give this team a little bit of grace and just be excited about where they are. And be really excited if they beat Iowa State tomorrow night, which I think that they will. And I will break that down later on in the show. And just hope for the best against Wisconsin. I mean, at this point, LSU basketball is playing with house money. Go out and do what you wanted to do from the very, very beginning of the season. Go out and play like you've played all season. Those things haven't changed. But a lot has. And I think that we need to keep that in consideration. Coming up next, now we're talking so much about LSU and Iowa State, let's preview that. What are Iowa State's weaknesses? What are their strengths? Plus, what one national broadcaster had to say about this game and why I disagree with him. I'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I got to tell y'all about StatHero, because my bracket after today is absolutely positively busted. And unless you believed in the St. Peter's Peacocks much more than I did, I think that your bracket is probably busted as well. So switch things up. Don't bust your bracket. Try it with StatHero's Pick'em. StatHero's NCAA single game Pick'ems pits the star players against each other in this amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players that you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. StatHero gives you the advantage, resulting in their game winners winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you're going up against. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups that you can comb through to take on head-to-head. They simply post sets of players for you to take on with a set of players that you choose. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. That's exactly what daily fantasy was meant to be. So I'm using StatHero this week, and I'm going to take from the home team. Give me Tari Eason, because I think that he is absolutely going to roll against Iowa State. That's why you should take Tari Eason. But sign up for free right now at stathero.com/lockedon and use promo code lockedon for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon. Use promo code lockedon for a 100% match. stathero.com/lockedon, promo code lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. LSU starting their tournament ride Friday night, tip-off at 6:20 Central, taking on Iowa State. Now, I think this game is going to be really, really interesting because it's two teams that have incredible defenses, and it's two teams that are kind of wishy-washy on offense. I mean, when LSU's on, when their offense is on, I mean, they are unstoppable. But that's the thing, is when it's on, if it's on. There's a lot of conditions there. But like I said, there was a national broadcaster that said something about this game, and I disagree with him. Jay Billis was doing a preview of all of the first round games, who he thinks could be on upset watch. I'm sure he didn't put Kentucky in there. But he mentioned LSU, and he said that this LSU Iowa State game has upset written all over it. This is what Jay Billis said. The LSU Tigers just lost Will Wade forever when he was fired after the NCAA notice of allegations put in writing what the LSU administration has known for years. Okay, first of all, I goes on to say about which it clearly didn't care. First of all, that is so dramatic. Lost Will Wade forever. He's not dead. Like, he's still around. He's just not the coach at LSU. And also, the allegations put in writing that LSU administration has known about for years but didn't care about. Like, get off your high horse, dude. Like, I hate using the excuse of, well, everyone does it because, like, that doesn't make it right. But also, like, quit acting like LSU is the only collegiate basketball team that's ever done anything wrong. Okay? That's first sentence just rubs me the wrong way, but I'll continue. This is Jay Billis. Does that motivate or deflate the team as it heads into a national championship event? That is anybody's guess. LSU is a great defensive team with length and athleticism and the ability to shut down opposing offenses with pressure and forcing turnovers. Tari Eason is the best player and the best sixth man in the nation. Add in Darius Days, and you have two formidable talents. But LSU does not shoot the ball well and tends to turn it over too much. LSU is a mixed bag, but it is talented and athletic. I would agree. Iowa State does not score easily and does not make free throws consistently, but the Cyclones sure do guard people. Isaiah Brockington leads Iowa State in spring at 17.5 points per game. Because Iowa State is so tough, I think the Cyclones can get the win here. A barrage of issues with what Jay Billis said there. I also agree with some of the things he says. I mean, LSU totally is a mixed bag. Like, I just said it. Like, there's some nights, like against Missouri, for example, in the SEC tournament. Like, LSU is rolling now. Like, LSU looked great. And they played Arkansas, and it was, back to the LSU team that we saw against Ole Miss and Vanderbilt earlier in the season. Just a team that could not shoot the ball. Just a team that got off to a really slow start and couldn't dig their way out of it. So I don't necessarily disagree with him there, but I do disagree with his logic. He says he thinks Iowa State is going to get the win here because Iowa State is so tough. Okay. That doesn't, I need more there. He mentions Iowa State's defense, and I agree. Iowa State has a wonderful defense, but statistically, LSU has a better one. I mean, he mentions Iowa State is their takeaways. Iowa State was great at generating takeaways. But LSU is the best in the nation in takeaways. LSU leads the nation in takeaways. And I'm not here trying to defend LSU. I'm not trying to be a homer over here saying whatever Jay Billis has to say to criticize LSU is wrong. I'm with him about a lot of these criticisms. Like, they can shoot the ball well. It's just they don't always do it. But if you're going to say, I'm putting LSU on upset alert and say that Iowa State's tough and that's the reason why they're going to win this game, I don't know if that's enough for me. The Will Wade stuff, I think, is fair. And he mentioned, is that going to fuel them or is that going to distract them? And I think that's a really good question. And it's something that we addressed earlier this week on the podcast. And we don't know. And it very much so could, it could distract the team. It could, their minds are elsewhere right now. I get that. But I also see that they could take this and manifest it into motivation. So, I mean, if they love Will Wade, they could say, we're going to win this for him. If they're frustrated and mad at the whole situation, which I don't blame them if they are, they could say, you know what? Whatever happens behind closed doors, whatever happens with the higher ups and the athletic athletic department and the NCAA and all of these legal issues, it doesn't matter because once we're on the court, we have one thing to prove. And we can play for the name on the front of our jersey, and we can play for our fans. And like Evan Nickelberry said in his opening press conference, his first after Will Wade was fired, he said, like, we can still go out there and do what we've needed to do. We can still go out there and play for our families, play for LSU, play for each other. I think he could do one of two things, but that's the tough thing is we don't necessarily know, which is going to make this game incredibly difficult to pick. But my official pick for the LSU Iowa State game, I really do think that LSU is going to beat this team. The spread sitting at -4. And we'll talk to one of our friends over at BetOnline later on in the show. We'll get a full breakdown, his thoughts on the game and kind of an inside look at the sports books and how they've responded to the Will Wade firing and kind of anticipation of the Iowa State game. But the spread's currently set at -4. I think that LSU could cover for sure because the skill's there. Because Iowa State, the greatest strength on their resume is their defense. Well, LSU has a pretty damn good defense too, And LSU's offense can outplay Iowa State's offense any day of the week if it shows up. And that's another big factor here. And that's why it makes it LSU an incredibly difficult team to predict. But I think that overall, LSU has more talent. And I think that overall, the biggest strengths for both of these teams, LSU is just better. I do think that it's a legitimate argument of, is the noise going to affect them? It's a young team, and it very well could. But yeah, it doesn't sound right with me, Jay Billis. I would say it's a tough team. So, okay. But coming up next, we will talk to Dave Mason from BetOnline, and he'll give us an inside look of how is the public? How are they betting this game? What does this game look like in the eyes of a bettor? We will get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but we're getting into spring break season. We're getting into warmer weather season, and I want to feel good about myself. So I want to stick to my resolution to eat right, and it's really easy to do thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually really enjoy eating Built Bars. Plus, if you haven't already, try the Puffs. If you haven't, you're going to miss out on one of the best tasting Built Bars on the market. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they taste just like your favorite s'mores treat, but they're a protein bar. And they are a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, as are all Built Bars. All of them are covered in 100% real chocolate. The Puffs are a fan favorite, and they've got great flavors. Cinnamon churro, they've got coconut marshmallow, my personal favorite, banana cream pie. They're so good, and I promise you they're going to be your new favorite as well. They're low calorie, they're high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. And a typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, but if you go to Built.com and scroll to the macros chart, you're going to be blown away at just how good they are for you. They're high in protein, they're low in calorie, they're high in fiber, and low in carbs. They only have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So they're going to keep you full all day long. And a candy bar has so many more calories, so much more sugar, and so many more carbs. So ditch the candy bars and switch to Built Bars instead. They taste like candy bars. They've got flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond. All new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're delicious and they're good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to pack in all the good stuff in there. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. It is that time of year again, people. It is college basketball tournament time. So from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and information. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and they just put up a bunch of new prop bets. You can even bet on the best mascot in the tournament. So whatever you're going to put money on, you can do it at BetOnline. And it's not just basketball. They're your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, live betting, and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And we have a very special guest on today. Dave Mason with BetOnline joins us now to break down LSU's matchup with Iowa State. If you want to put some money on it, Dave has all the answers. So first and foremost, Dave, I got to ask you straight up, who are you putting your money on, LSU or Iowa State?
Oh wow, this is a tough one. I'm not even betting this game.
If you had
So
to.
if I had to, I'm going to go with LSU. Iowa State, man, they're so cold as of late. They've lost their last three. Their offense is struggling. I mean, their defense is great, but their offense is struggling. I mean, they're one of the worst offenses in the tournament. They've scored the last three games? I mean, they scored 36, 68, and 41. So they're going to have a hard time putting points on the board. But again, their defense is great, and we'll see how LSU responds to a little bit of turmoil going on down there.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and I wanted to ask because Iowa State is a cold team, and Iowa State is a team that has struggled with offense, which is not just exclusive to Iowa State. I think LSU has their fair share of offensive struggles as well. But did you see any shifts in the sports book or in the number of tickets or the amount of dollars going in, putting money on Iowa State after the news that Will Wade was fired? Did you see like an influx or a big change in the sports books or the way
not too much, not too much. A little bit of extra action came in. Whenever something like that happens, whether it's a trade or a suspension or a firing or whatever, you'll see some folks trying to beat the market. But it just and nothing crazy at all. I mean, the overall action's pretty split down the middle, 50-50. So it's one of those games, I guess the public is like thinking about with me, it's just a hard game to figure out. There's just so many moving parts and variables to this one. And that Wade, what's going on there, that just puts a whole monkey wrench in this. How's that LSU team going to respond? They could come together and when hard times, Michigan way back when, and I'm just going to show my age, but we're talking the 80s. They lost their head coach right before the tournament. I totally forget who, and Steve Fisher took over and they won it all. He was a new coach and he went 6-0 in his first 6 games. So it's kind of weird how a team will respond. You see that a lot when a head coach gets fired or whatever in other sports, that team just comes together and plays harder than ever. So what's going to be the case here? We'll see.
I mean, that's a question that I've asked myself. I think our listeners have asked is, how is this team going to respond? And like you said, it could go one of two ways. It could be you crash and burn without your leader at the helm, or you could respond with, hey, we've had adversity before and we'll bounce back even stronger. But you said the public is pretty split 50-50 on Iowa State over in LSU. Why do you think that is?
It's just, I mean, all these games, today's games, it was just actions 50-50. It seems like these odds are very tight on all these games, and there hasn't been too many big sweats for the house right now. Usually you get a ton of games where there's 80% action on one side and big needs, but just all these games so far, not all of them, most of these games so far, I've just been close to 50-50 action. I've never seen anything like it. I've been doing this for about 2 decades now. This is the most even action I've seen this early in the tournament. So I do not know.
It is pretty crazy. Today was, on Thursday at least, that was a wild day of games. I mean, Gonzaga playing it close with Georgia State for quite some time. So a wild day indeed. And if that's indicative of anything that we're going to see in the coming tournament, I'm incredibly excited. But you mentioned it, and I mentioned it as well, that these are two teams that have kind of struggled throughout the season with offense, but have not struggled a single bit with defense. LSU is one of the top defensive teams in the country. Iowa State's defense, also very impressive. The over-under on BetOnline is at 128. LSU's not an offensive team. Iowa State's not an offensive team. Personally, for me, I'm putting my money on the under. But where are you putting your money, or hypothetical money? Over
Yeah, I think you're on the right side. I mean, it is a low total. I think that's the second lowest total for the day.
Is it really?
Yeah, I believe it is.
What's lower?
So what's lower? Right here, Virginia Tech, Texas. That's 103.5. So that's super
really
low.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, these games are low for a reason. So. We've already talked about it a couple of times that both offenses struggle, good defenses. So that hence the low total, but it's not a lot of points. So, if Iowa State finally hits some 3-pointers for the first time ever, they could fly over. But Yeah, I mean, it's something like that. I'll ride the under 2 right there. So hope for both these teams, struggle on offense like they have.
I'm hoping this isn't the day that Iowa State just figures out how to shoot threes. And I'm hoping this is the day that LSU remembers how to shoot threes. But I mean, LSU is kind of in a tough area in the bracket. They've got Kansas in their bracket. They've got Wisconsin in their bracket. Who do you have coming out of LSU's area in the bracket?
Kansas. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not, it's not a ballsy picker by any means, but I have Kansas coming out of the region.
I feel like that's how my entire bracket has been. Not incredibly groundbreaking. I have Gonzaga
Yeah.
winning it all, which is not a hot
Yeah,
take
me
by
too.
any
Me too.
means.
I like them in the beginning of the season, but I mean, they've been favorites the whole year, wire to wire favorites. I just think it's Gonzaga's year. They just have such a well balanced team, and Mark Few, he's been there twice, and he hasn't cut the nets down yet. But I think he breaks through this year. I think this is his year. They're rightful favorites, but in these tournaments, anything can happen when it's just a single elimination. So we'll see.
And anything can happen. I was sweating that pick a little bit today. I thought, are we really going to have a 16 seed upset a 1 seed today and Gonzaga and Georgia State? But switching to the women's side of things, women's NCAA tournament going down as well. And currently on BetOnline, LSU women's basketball has 40-1 odds to win it all. Now, we saw them play one of their worst games of the season in the SEC tournament, but I still think that this is a team that is poised to make a run in the tournament and absolutely could make some noise. Now, they have the second best odds in the conference to win it all. South Carolina women's team currently listed with 7-4 odds. I mean, they're the overwhelming favorite. But why do you think betting on LSU at 40-1 odds would be worth the bettor's money?
Well, I mean, 40-1, it's long odds, They do have a pretty tough region. Stanford's always tough, right? And I think they're the third highest to win it all. Yeah, they're plus 475 to win it all. So Texas is tough as well, but they're 40-1 as well. So, if you're looking for a long shot, LSU's right there. I mean, women's basketball, it's hard to bet against those big teams, the South Carolina, Connecticut, and Stanford. They're the rightful favorites. But if you're going to look for a long shot, I mean, you got to, when you're going to the tournament, you got to put some long shots. You got to put some of those 40 to 50-1 teams in there. LSU has a good chance as anybody. So what the heck? Throw a couple bucks on the 40. That's the thing about this 40-1 odds. It's a few bucks, and you can turn it into a pretty big profit.
Well, I appreciate you, Dave. Again, Dave Mason with BetOnline. We appreciate you, Dave. And make sure if you're going to put some money on these games, do it with BetOnline.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode, we're going to do a full breakdown of LSU, Iowa State, the good, the bad. Hopefully there's a whole lot more good than there is bad, but we'll break that down on the next episode of Locked On LSU.